Hi there, I'm Charlie Fawcett, and today I'm joined by BBC Radio Devon's own James Vickery to discuss all things Exeter City. How are you doing, James?
Very well, Charlie. Always a little bit better after a good run in the league. So at the moment doing all right.
So we'll start off with a bit about you and then move on to the current situation at the club. So firstly, I'd just like to ask what it's like to cover a club that you're so passionate about.
Sometimes it can be really easy when things are going well, and sometimes it can be really difficult when things aren't going quite to plan. And I think it's fair to say this season we've had a little bit of everything. So we've had Exeter, who had a really good start, and it was amazing to be covering them and reporting on them, commentating and presenting the BBC Radio Devon sports show from St James Park. Then they fell away quite badly over winter and even at one point fell into the relegation places in League One, which was quite hard for me because, as an Exeter fan, you always want them to see them doing well. And it makes it very hard when you're presenting too, because your head's telling you you have to remain impartial, but your heart is telling you that you're feeling really glum and really down that they've lost again. And more recently, things have been a little bit better. So at the moment, unbeaten in their last five. They've got some tough games coming up, but they pulled away from the relegation places. So it's when things are going well, it makes my life a little bit easier. When it's not going so well, it is quite tough because you have to separate the fan from you, which is obviously running right through me, with the professional in me, that I have to be objective about the club, as I would do Plymouth Argyle or Torquay United, or in the rugby, the Exeter Chiefs. And some
So, I mean, you say things are looking up, but if you had to pinpoint what you think the main reasons are for Exeter's struggles this season, what would you say?
Exeter struggles this season coincided with us losing our best player, defender Tristan Kramer, who was recalled from his loan spell with us, and he went back to Brentford and is now playing at Millwall. So it coincided with that. It also coincided with a number of really key injuries to players. Our captain, Piers Sweeney, who's also a defender, became injured as well. Jack Fitzwater, who is a defender, was injured as well. So for a long time, we were playing with this really makeshift back line, and I say through no fault of the players that were put in weren't necessarily all that experienced at this level. Some of them were playing out of position, and we went through a really dark period of. I think we conceded at one point 13 goals in 3 games, including a 6-2 home defeat against Leyton Orient. And I think that was a big wake up call to everyone. So there's that. I mean, Exeter, just by the way the club is run, it's run well. It doesn't have huge amounts of debt. The club always tries to be in the black rather than in the red. So we're not able to necessarily go out and spend big bucks on big players like other teams in League One can do right now. So I think when you add to that, you've got to make the best of what you've got. It was a real struggle for the best part of 6 weeks, sort of over Christmas and into the new year, but we have turned a corner.
I suppose you could argue that's sort of the issue that comes with being the fan ownership model. Obviously, it's great to not be in the debt and stuff like that, but if you have an injury crisis, the funds out there like they are for everyone else in the league.
I read on the message boards about what would the fans of this club prefer? Would they prefer to own it, or would they prefer to have someone with a lot of money pumping that money in like we see at other clubs around the country? And the overriding message and the overriding feeling is that no, the us fans still want to own the club and be the majority shareholder in the club, which I think is really important to us, because there's always a lot of talk about doing things the Exeter way rather than what would traditionally be seen as the other way. I mean, I think when you talk about the bad run that we've had, some clubs would have sacked their manager in that time. Plummeting down the table, not winning, or only winning once in the league in the space of nearly 3 months. Um, that's that. Anywhere else, I think, would see the manager gone. However, Exeter always do things slightly differently because it is fan owned, and we've stuck with Gary Coldwell. And again, he's turned it around like he did last season as well. So sometimes it proves that if you stick with a manager, it will all be all right in the end, and not having to have these knee jerk reactions. But I think because of the way the club is owned, I think what's quite quite good about that is that we do give people time, not just managers but players. We do give players an opportunity, particularly the youth setup at Exeter, which is well documented at bringing through great players. Ollie Watkins being one of them, who's now gone to play for England. That model of success is all sort of tied in with the trust and being able to bring players through, sell players on for really decent money. It keeps the club going. But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with the Exeter way. There's nothing wrong with other methods that we see in football of very rich people coming in taking over clubs. But personally, I sometimes question the motive of those people who have got money who want to play around with football clubs.
So you talk about the Exeter way and how sticking with managers and sticking with players and stuff like that can come out in the wash. From an outsider looking in, I think Exeter look pretty much safe this season now. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I would. I mean, it wasn't looking that way about 6 weeks ago, but since the last international um, break, and since there's a little break in play that Exeter had, and they used it to go over to Spain and have a warm weather training camp, things seem to have really improved since then. They're on 44 points at the moment. Obviously, there's always that magic 50 points that we talk about across football of your safety net. With the amount of games we've got left, if we can't get 6 points from them, we don't deserve to stay up. Always in football, you look at the sort of trajectory of where teams are going, and you look at Exeter's based on the last 5 games points per game. I think we're on it's either 1.6 or 1.8, which isn't too bad. It's sort of top towards the top end of League One in terms of how all the other clubs are doing at the moment. I think there are 3 clubs pretty much already down. Shrewsbury, Crawley look as if they're already down, as well as Cambridge. Burton are really fighting for their lives, so Burton are sort of the fly in the ointment a little bit. But 44 points, direction of travel, unbeaten in the last 5, picking up decent points at places like Rotherham and Reading, and beating those sides around us. We've beaten Cambridge, Shrewsbury, and Mansfield recently as well. I would say the job isn't done mathematically yet, but it probably isn't going to need for us to get to 50 points. I think maybe we're already at the safety mark without realizing it.
And I was going to touch on the Spanish training camp. I think for me, I feel like that was a catalyst in the change in form. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I know the manager agrees, Gary Caldwell, because he talks about it all of the time. And in fact, I'm off to do a press conference with him in a minute, and I will ask him about the tangible benefits of what he's seen from that training camp. Going back to the Exeter way, this is quite interesting. A lot of fans weren't happy about that Spanish trip because they didn't feel that maybe Exeter deserved it at that point. At that point, the league form was pretty awful. And I think when you are owned by the fans, you have to get the fans on side. And it was a real bone of contention about whether or not Exeter should have gone on that trip or not. And what's quite interesting now is when you look at the social media pages of the fans that were moaning about that Spanish trip when it happened, they've gone very quiet about it. Which football fans are football fans, aren't they? I'm a football fan. We're all entitled to our own opinions, but I think sometimes football fans, particularly at Exeter, because of the fact we own our football club, we there's a certain element of fans possibly within the mix that feel a bit more entitled. Oh, we own a football club, we should be saying whether or not they go on this trip or not. Well, actually, no. My personal belief is that it should be the manager and the board which say whether or not they go on this trip to Spain. And I think you're right. I mean, look, since we've come back from that, we've won 3 games and we've drawn 3 games and we haven't lost. So maybe there is something to say about going on a training camp like that in warmer weather, because the weather back here was absolutely awful at the time. It's a bit better now. And Gary Caldwell, as a manager, is now doing quite well at Exeter. As a player, he's also experienced these warm weather camps with Wigan when he was at Wigan, and he said the benefits are amazing because it brings the players together. We we've got a fairly new back line because of the injuries and because of losing Tristan Kramer, which I mentioned to you earlier. So it was a chance for those new defenders who he'd brought into the club during January to really gel and spend some time together. And I think we are seeing the really positive effects of that right now.
Speaking of Gary Caldwell, if Exeter to keep hold of him next season, I assume he won't be going anywhere. Can you see progression next year? Do you think they could be pushing a bit higher up in the table?
Yeah, and I think actually this season there's maybe a bit of an admission that we should be a bit higher than where we are, and because of our injury problems and issues that we had in defence as well, maybe we're not as high as we should be. I mean, last season we finished, it was either 14th or 15th. It's a little bit hazy for me at the moment. And that was one of our highest ever league finishes. You know, Exeter, we know where we should be in the sort of league pyramid. We're never going to be pushing for Premier League. Getting to the Championship would be a minor miracle. So we make the most of what we can do in League One. And I think the club does have ambitions to one day be in the Championship, but build there slowly, not do it by just chucking a load of money at it that we see some other clubs in League One doing right now. And I think if it's slow and steady, it's the Exeter way. We could get there. I think definitely in years to come, we Exeter should be looking at challenging for the playoffs. I don't think that would be out of the question with the right development, with the right backing from the board, spending a little bit more money on some players if we can, but sort of still doing it in a way that is very true to the Exeter values, which is very important to Exeter supporters.
Exeter had a very busy summer, and then because of the injury crisis, had a very busy January. Out of all the players that they brought in this season, which one's impressed you the most?
Well, in the summer, it was Tristan Kramer. Absolutely amazing in defence, brilliant. But it would have gone on to be our best player this season without a doubt. Sadly, he was recalled in January by Brentford and is now working wonders in the Championship with Millwall. If you look at any Millwall supporter, they'll say that he's outstanding for them. So we had a real find there, and obviously Gary Caldwell should be credited for that. I think overall this season we should be maybe looking at Exeter goalkeeper Joe Whitworth, who we brought in from Crystal Palace on loan. Exeter over recent years have had a really incredible success rate with lone goalkeepers that have been brought in, and the fans absolutely love them. Last season we had a player called Vil Sinisalo, who's now gone on to play for Celtic, and is Kasper Schmeichel's number two. So that just goes to show how Exeter are able to attract players in. Whitworth is amazing. He's a great shot stopper. He's a real character as well, and I think when you're in the lower leagues like Exeter are, League One, League Two, you need some characters around the dressing room. And nearly every single player, and indeed Gary Caldwell, who I talk to regularly, say he is an absolute character that, even in adversity, when Exeter have maybe lost 6-2, as we have done this season to Leyton Orient, he has this ability to bring the players together and, try and get that mentality through to the players. Look, we need to move on. We've got to move on. Really good goalkeeper, saved a few penalties for us this season. He's very quick. He's not the tallest, but you don't need to be if you're a bit springy on your feet as well. But you can see that link up, and you can see that relationship that he's got with the defenders in front of him as well. So I think he's been a great find. Sadly, I think it will just be a year loan deal. We only seem to bring in goalkeepers on 1 year loans, and the fans fall in love with them, and then sadly they go back to their parent clubs again. But Joe Whitworth for me has been a brilliant find for the club.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on both because you can see it when you watch Joe Whitworth that he's 100% going to go on to, don't want to be disrespectful to Exeter, but he's going to go on to bigger things.
Yeah,
And as for
absolutely.
Cromer, I watched him play. Well, as a Leeds fan, I watched him play live at Ellen Road last week for Millwall, and he did impress. Like he didn't, like you see a player come from League One, but he moved seamlessly into the Championship and just looked that level.
And I think he has been although the back line that we now have that has been brought in is keeping a lot of clean sheets, and Gary has worked really hard at tightening up that defence, and it feels as if we turned a bit of a corner with that. There is absolutely no doubt that Tristan Kramer has been a huge miss, and actually he contributed with a lot of goals when he was with us as well from corners and set pieces, which we have missed at times since he hasn't been with us.
And you talk about the Exeter way. I'm going to move on to more of the fan ownership side of things now. Being the fan-owned club, did it feel like a bit of a victory for that whole structure when you got the FA Cup run this year and had the game against Forest? Because you could put this fan ownership on the world stage.
Yes, and I know the club were very keen to promote that as part of it. So we did a lot of pieces about it on BBC Radio Devon around that time. I know Mike Bushell from BBC Breakfast came down and did a wonderful piece on Exeter and the fan ownership, and that obviously is something that not only went around the UK but went to BBC's global reach, which is really important. And I know that was key for the club to be able to talk about its values and what's really important for them. We're a community club, we're run by our fans, but it's stronger than even that. The work that Exeter City does in the community of Exeter in supporting vulnerable people and people that need support is extraordinary. And I think that has also shone through as well. And I know from the interviews that I did at the time around that Nottingham Forest FA Cup fourth round game were really important. And the club was wanting to tell its story, but wanting to also show what it does in the community and wanting to remain true to its values as well. And I think what was also very interesting about that cup game is they didn't increase the ticket prices for that game, and they really could have done, and they could have absolutely been quids in, because the stadium was full and they could have charged double, and I think fans would have paid it. But Exeter didn't want to do that, and I think there have been some high profile cases of clubs that have charged a heck of a lot for those big games, Tamworth being one of them, where I think an adult suddenly went from what would normally be about 18 quid to 42 pounds. And I think it backfired a little bit on Tamworth. They may have made a lot of money from it. And there's a train of thought that some people say you can't blame them for that. But I think if you are a true community club, fan owned like Exeter, you need to remain true to your values, and that's what they did. And it was also important for the club that a lot of those Nottingham Forest fans went away thinking what a lovely club we are, and looking out for our results in the future as well. And I think from what I've seen on social media, a lot of Nottingham Forest fans now have a bit of a soft spot for Exeter City as well. So it feels as if it was job done all round, really.
And I think the thing that was announced today is pretty cool. They're letting the fans vote on the home kit for this season. I think that's a really cool idea to bring the club and the community together even more.
Even though we are owned by our fans, I think sometimes the fans can feel a little bit powerless about some of the decisions that are made at the club, because the club has a club board and a trust board with trustees, and it all works that way. But I think this gives the fans some empowerment to feel as if they're making a decision. And fans, as we know, Charlie, absolutely love kits and absolutely love strips, and it's something that we've done before. And yeah, I was really encouraged to see that a little bit earlier on, that the fans are being given the opportunity to vote on the home strip for next season. Let's just hope we get it right.
Finally, I feel like I have to mention if I'm talking about Exeter, because what got me interested in Exeter was the "You Don't Know What You're Doing" podcast, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to mention. Have you noticed an influx in interest, like being so close to the club from that podcast? Because since listening to it, it's now I'll come out of Ellen Road on a Saturday, and Exeter will be the first result I'll check. So, like, have you
That's
seen that?
amazing.
Have you noticed an interest?
That's absolutely brilliant to hear. I have noticed a bit of an interest. I think David and John and Alfie, who run the podcast, probably noticed it a little bit more than I do. But I see it on social media, following them as well. When you get people saying, "Oh, I can't believe I'm watching an Exeter game," but I'm watching an Exeter game now because of you guys. And some people have actually come down to the club, to St James Park, to see games, which I think is extraordinary. And David Earl is an amazing man in so many ways, such a funny guy with what he's done with his comedy. I know you know the story, but the fact he's landed back in Devon. His wife is from Devon, so they've come back to Devon. And he could have gone to Plymouth Argyle, who at the time were doing very well. He could have gone to Torquay United, who at the time were doing less well. And he could have gone to Exeter, who have always just, and no disrespect to us, just sort of plodded along quite quietly in the background. and he decided to come to Exeter because he put this out to a vote saying, "Oh, where should I go? I'm in Devon. Which club should I go to?" And he was won over by Exeter, and I don't think he's looked back. But what two things have happened to me related to the podcast, which I have found extraordinary. I was at Wembley Stadium, 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium, and this is a true story. It was England against Brazil. It was a friendly, and it was about this time last year, I think, or it may have been May last year. And I went with my boys and I went with my wife, and I was on an escalator going up to Wembley, bearing in mind there are 80,000 people there. It's a sellout. And someone taps me on the shoulder and says, "Are you James Vickery?" And I said, "Yes, I'm James Vickery." And they said, "I know you from the podcast." And I was thinking at the time, well, BBC Radio Devon don't do a podcast. What are you talking about? And they said it was the "You Don't Know What You're Doing" podcast, which I just found extraordinary. In 80,000 people, someone had recognised me from the podcast. It was totally extraordinary. And something very similar happened to me when I was just minding my own business on a beach in Dawlish, which is not too far away from us here in Exeter, just 10 miles down the road in Devon. Just walking along the promenade in Dawlish, and someone said, "You're James Vickery from the You Don't Know What You're Doing podcast, aren't you?" And I just find that extraordinary. But it does go to show the reach you can get if you do a podcast and do it well. And it's not just about football, but it's about life, and it's about observations of life. And I think they've really got that right. And it's great that some people have decided to come to Exeter to watch us as a club. It's great that some people have decided to go to some away games to watch Exeter and be, if it's close to them through the podcast. I think it's brilliant. And David and John and Alfie should take a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing, really, because like I've watched quite a few games this season, and like I know a lot of the players for a team that I don't even support. You know what I mean? It's just it's amazing how the podcast
I
can
think
do
that's
that.
brilliant. Yeah, I think that's brilliant, mate. Honestly, and I'm very pleased to hear that we've got another fan in the mix.